This is PBC News reporting from the city of Jerusalem. I'm now at the city walls outside Jerusalem, and you can see how the wall looks like on the background.
Yep.
Okay. But I'm sorry to say that this is not the wall that Nehemiah built. The wall that Nehemiah built was destroyed by the Romans in AD 70. And but thank God, after that, it was rebuilt by the Ottoman Turks, by King Sulaiman in 1560 something, right? So this is the wall as it is now. And I understand last time from Pastor Lim, he took a team from PBC to Jerusalem for the tour, and he told me that he has gone to visit some of these walls. So I hope maybe he could have gotten some stones or some bricks from the wall, and then he would do a show and tell next week on Wednesday when he takes on chapter 3. Okay? Pastor Lim?
I don't think I can find any stone. If every tourist take a stone, there'll be no wall left.
Am I on share screen now?
Not yet, Uncle. Okay, yes, now I see. Now I see.
Okay. All right, that's a brief introduction to the walls of Nehemiah. So today we are going to chapter 2 of the book of Nehemiah. Okay, and we went through a little bit of the history last week, but we were talking about what is the book of Nehemiah all about. It is a story of one man who took action and literally rebuilt a city and its walls. And this man took on a mission that without God being involved, it would be impossible to accomplish. So this is the Mission Impossible man. And his name is not Tom Cruise. His name is Nehemiah. Okay? And Nehemiah was the right man at the right place at the right time and doing the right thing. Okay? And what we can learn from the book of Nehemiah is we're going to learn how to pray effectively, how to pray and take action, not just pray and do nothing. We also learn about leadership. We will learn about how to deal with serious problems. We can see Nehemiah facing a lot of big problems, okay? And I would like to add here tonight that interspersed the above topics, we will also learn about the nature of God, His love, His mercies, His providence, His guidance, and His blessing, right? This will be the underlying lessons that we will learn from it. So I'd like to take just very quickly, again, reminding ourselves of the historical timeline. We know that God established the nation of Israel, okay? And when King Solomon died, he passed the kingdom to his son Rehoboam, who didn't rule the people well. So they rebelled. And that's why the nation split into two, the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. And the kings continued in their rebellious way, their sinful way, turning to idolatry and disobedience to God. So God allowed other nations to come and overthrow them. So the first one to overthrow them was the Assyrian Empire. Then came the Babylonians. The Babylonian Empire, they came and they actually destroyed the temple that Solomon built and also the walls. Then the third one is the Persian Empire. And they were in the captivity of this Persian Empire And after the Persian king, King Cyrus, after 70 years of captivity, he allowed the first expedition to go back to Jerusalem. And this first return or first expedition back was led by this leader of the Jews called Zerubbabel. He went back, he taught, he rebuilt the temple, all right? Then about 58 years later, Ezra, a high priest, took the second group of people back to Jerusalem and they teach the word to the Jews there. And then 13 years later came Nehemiah, who took the third return of the people from exile back to Jerusalem to build the walls. So this is where we are at now. So the theme of the book is return. That's what we're going to look at in chapter 1 and chapter 2. Then rebuild, renew, and reform. All right. So the broad outline of the books, we will now just focus on chapter 1 that we had done last week, which is the vision. Right. Today we go to chapter 2, and we have the plan for the work being revealed to us. Okay. So we will focus on that. So let me just go into a summary of chapter 1, all right, so that we can flow in easily to chapter 2. First, we read that Nehemiah received the terrible news, the bad news, that Jerusalem and the city walls of Jerusalem is in rubble, okay? And we read about his reaction. When he heard the bad news, what did he do? He wept. He mourned, he fasted, and he prayed intensely, right? And we read about his prayer, but highlighting the last sentence of his prayer in verse 11, he says, "Please listen to the prayer of your servant and give success by granting him favor from this man." Okay, that was the last sentence of his prayer. So I don't know whether we have time for reflection. Maybe just to read through, and if any one of you have prepared to share, we will do this at later part, okay? But the question that we posed was, what are some of the things in the world today that breaks God's heart? And choose one item from the list, pray over it, and ask God to give you his heart for the matter. How might you use your current situation or position to do something about it? Okay. If we have time later, we will come back to this. Okay. We do it at the end of the chapter 2 study. The second question I posed was, take a look at the walls that are supposed to be surrounding us and protecting us. The spiritual wall of protection. How is its condition? Is it strong and stable? Is it intact? Okay. Or is it broken, in shamble and rubble? Or only maybe certain parts are intact. But the broken parts are where the enemies can break in and overcome us. So we are talking about the walls. In a symbolic way or spiritual way, they are the spiritual walls that we have to have protecting us. So make sure they are in good condition. So the question is to do, or assignment is to do a safety check and assessment and make a report, state down actions to be taken to mend the broken parts. Okay. Okay, now we go into chapter 2, Nehemiah. Okay. It was the month called Nisan in the 20th year of the King Artaxerxes' rule. I was serving the king with wine. I took the wine and I gave it to the king. I'd never been sad before when I was with the king. So the king said to me, "Your face is very sad, but you are not ill. This means that you are sad in your heart." Then I was very afraid, and I said to the king, "I hope that the king will have a long life. I will tell you why I am sad. The city where my ancestors' graves are is in a heap of stones. Fire has burned its gates." So we see here, first verse itself, it mentioned the month of Nisan. Actually, this mentioning of the month actually tells us how much time has passed since Nehemiah had heard about the terrible news. You see, you remember chapter 1, verse 1, they talk about the month of Kislev, right? See, from the month of Kislev, where Nehemiah received the bad news and started to pray, to the month of Nisan, it's actually 4 months, okay? So we know for a fact then, Nehemiah prayed earnestly, sincerely for 4 months. For 4 months, he prayed unceasingly, day and night. If you go back and read chapter 1, all right? He also prayed patiently, waiting upon the Lord. Can we have that kind of patience to pray for 4 months, waiting for God for the answer? Some of us don't have that kind of patience, right? After 1 month, maximum 2 months, we kind of give up or get tired. But Nehemiah prayed for 4 months. And lastly, he prayed persistently for 4 months. He just come before God and cry unto God and plead unto God for 4 months. He prayed until something happened, push. Okay? So these are the signs of a strong prayer warrior like Nehemiah. And I hope we can learn something from there. Then in the next verse, we see the name King Artaxerxes. Okay, if you again refer to verse 11, it says here, please listen to the prayer of your servant and give success by granting him favor from this man. This man. Who is this man? It is King Artaxerxes, right? And something interesting about this king is, this is the same king during Ezra's time who ordered the attempt to rebuild the wall to be stopped. Okay, there was an attempt to rebuild the wall during Ezra time, but some people, some enemies of the Jews, came to this king and convinced him that it's not a good idea. Therefore, this king said, "Stop all work." Right. So now we can appreciate the difficult task that Nehemiah has got on his hand to approach this same king for the same matter. Right? So bear that in mind. Then the king said to him, your face is very sad. Your face is very sad. Okay? The king noticed Nehemiah's sadness. You see, Nehemiah has so far kept it to himself for quite some time. But on this day, whether intentionally or not, his sadness was visible enough that the king noticed and commented on it. So when the king commented on it and said that you look very sad, what was the reaction of Nehemiah? Nehemiah became very afraid. Nehemiah was afraid. Then I was afraid, he said. Now, do you know why Nehemiah was afraid? Look, remember, he's a man of God, prayer warrior. Then he can say he is afraid. Anyone can give some thoughts here and say and share your thoughts. Why you think Nehemiah was afraid? Anyone?
He was before a king.
Because he was before a king, right? Okay. Anybody else? He always been before the king, right? But why on this occasion he was afraid? After the king said, "Why do you look sad?" Anyone?
Because he has to be always joyful and happy when he approach the king. Cannot be sad.
Good answer. Correct answer. Okay. So he was scared of what the king would do to him for breaking the court's protocol. You see, during that time, it was against the court's tradition or court protocol for officials or nobles to be set in the presence of the king. The officer's job was to serve the king and make him happy, like what Pat said. Okay, the king didn't want to be concerned with the troubles of these servants. They were to do their job well and leave their own personal problems at home or outside the court. So King Artaxerxes could have him executed. See, during that time, the kings doesn't require much of a reason to have people killed, you see. So that's why Nehemiah was worried or was afraid, was scared, all right? But notice how he responded. Even though he was scared or afraid, he was scared, but he didn't let the fear control him. He didn't freeze up, He didn't panic. He didn't apologize or beg for forgiveness or mercy. He didn't turn around and run out of the court. Thank God for that. That would have been the end of the story, right? If he had done that. Yes, he was afraid, but there was an opportunity here. It was an opportunity he had been praying for. Even though he was afraid, he moved forward to take advantage of this opportunity. He didn't want to waste this chance. In fact, we see he's actually quite bold, even though he was fearful in his heart. So what's the application here? The application is fear is a natural reaction sometimes, right? We are human, okay? God doesn't want us to allow our fear to control us. We must move beyond our fear to do what God wants us to do. Imagine if Nehemiah had a panic attack and he get frozen, he don't know what to do. Then it would be a wasted chance for him. So sometimes we get let fear grip hold of us that we can't do anything. I myself actually was very fearful when it was decided that I took on this Bible session for the church. I was fearful. Okay, I haven't taught Bible study in a structured way for more than 20 years already. So I took this on with fear and trembling. I think Pastor knows, right? Okay, so what are some of the things that you may be afraid of or nervous about that you still need to do? For example, sharing the gospel. Do you fear sharing the gospel? Or making sacrifices for God's kingdom? Or public preaching, if you are called to do that? Or to lead a Bible study session, like me, like now? Or discipling others? Or maybe talking to your parents about the Lord? Or confronting somebody in sin? Or maybe speaking up against peer pressure or the evils in society? And I know some people are afraid to get married, okay? So, verse 4, the king asked me, what do you want? So I prayed to God in heaven. Then I said to the king, I am your servant. I shall do whatever you want. If your thoughts are favorable towards me, please send me to Judah. Send me to the city where the graves of my ancestors are. Then I can rebuild it. The queen was sitting next to the king. And the king said to me, how long will your journey take? And when will you return? So I told him when I will return, and my plans pleased the king, and he sent me. So here the king asked Nehemiah for his request. What do you want? The king said. So this means that the king was not angry, even though Nehemiah showed his sad face, remember? So what a relief to Nehemiah, okay? And this is also referring to his the prayer I'm mentioning it a few times for emphasis, okay? Verse 11 of chapter 1. Please listen to my prayer for your servant and give success by granting him favor from this man. So we are seeing that this king, this man, is already responding to that line, okay? We see that his prayer is partially being answered. Nehemiah saw the answer and then he responded appropriately to it. So what is the application we can learn here? Right? We can learn from Nehemiah that we should rely on God at all times. Don't be afraid, okay? No situation is too urgent to offer up a quick help of prayer. I think I missed one part. Is it? So I prayed to God in heaven. All right. So Nehemiah, when king asked him, he make a quick prayer to God. Okay. So so our life should be like his. Okay. To be saturated with prayer. Our natural response when facing decision, trials, temptation, or emergency should be to say, God, help me. God, help me. You see, Nehemiah's spontaneous prayer. So I prayed to God in heaven. Now, why do you think Nehemiah prayed to God before answering the king? This is because this is a crucial point in time. He passed the first test that the king did not execute him for showing his sadness. Now he has to get to the rest of the favor from this man. Whether he can proceed with his plans will all depend on how he presents his request to this king. This is a do or die act, right? Now, what do you think? What do you think would his prayer be when he made that short prayer to God? No, see, Nehemiah had already prayed about this issue, but now in the heat of moment, he turned to God for one more heartfelt prayer to God. Now, it was probably a very quick and silent prayer. And yet that short prayer had power, okay? It had power because it has its foundation in Nehemiah's lifestyle of prayer. Our lives should be filled both with dedicated times of private prayer and also with those short prayers of help in times of need. So if we only ask God for help in times of need and never pray to him regularly, those prayers may lack the same kind of power. But of course, God can answer any prayers. But I believe that God also wants us to see us rely on him to prayer consistently, regularly, all right? So now we come back to the application, all right? We can learn here from Nehemiah that we should trust God at all times, rely on him, okay? No situation is too urgent to offer up a quick prayer for help. Our lives should be like his, be saturated with prayer. Our natural response when facing decision, trials, temptations, or emergency should be to say, God, help me. God, help me. Say if you are in Nehemiah's position, right? What would your words be when you call to God for help in that short period of time? Just say, God, help me. No need to have too long a prayer because you don't have time. Now, Nehemiah's request to the king here, we see that he frankly asked for the king's permission to allow him, okay, to lead an expedition to city in Judah. All right, to Judah to rebuild it. Now, this is a huge request, right? But he was bold enough to ask the king to send him back to Judah to rebuild the city. Okay. And then the king asked, how long will your journey take? And Nehemiah was able to quickly give a clear answer. It tells us that he has prepared very well for this situation. He has researched all he could do for this situation. He knew how long it would take to get there, how long it would take to build the wall, how long it would take to go back. He has planned it to the minute detail. And he told the king that when he would return. And the king and his plan pleased the king. The king was impressed, and the king agreed to send Nehemiah back. Right. So what does it mean when the king agreed and said he will send him back? What does it mean? It means that God has answered Nehemiah's prayer in total. He has gotten the full favor from this man. His 4 months of prayer has paid off. God has answered his prayer because the king said he agreed to send him. Therefore, we must always persevere in prayer. We must never give up. He will answer in his time, at the right time. But we must be there at the right time. Okay? So we have to have patience and trust God. Now we go to verse 7. And I said to the king, if the king is willing, please give me letters to me. There will be for the government officers of the district beyond the Euphrates River. In these letters, please tell them to let me go through their territory to Judah. Please also give me a letter to Asaph, who looks after the king's forest. In this letter, please tell him to give me wood from the trees. I will use this wood to make beams for the gates of the castle, but that is by the temple. I will use it for the gates in the city wall. I will also use some beams to build a house for myself. The king did everything I asked. He did that because God was looking after me. So you see that Nehemiah asked for additional requests. All right, he asked for letters of protection that he can give to all the regional rulers of the land that he will have to pass through. This is a bold and a very wise request. But he didn't stop there. He then asked for another letter, this time to give to Asaph, to ask for materials to use to rebuild the wall. Now, how did he even know the name Asaph? Okay, this again showed that Nehemiah had already researched this issue ahead of time. He had gotten all the info that he would require to communicate with the king when the opportunity came out, so that he would know exactly what to say. He was very well prepared. Now imagine what the result would have been if the king asked him what he wanted, and Nehemiah would say, I don't know. I really haven't thought about it yet. Let me get back to you, O king, in 3 days' time. That would have been a disaster, right? He would have missed the golden opportunity. But by having a detailed plan ready to go, Nehemiah demonstrated to the king he was competent to be entrusted with this huge task. He gave confident answers, which in turn made the king confident that he knew what he was doing. The king was really impressed. Also, this request for materials was the largest yet. Not only did Nehemiah ask the king for permission to rebuild the wall, he asked him to finance it also. So it's like saying, I give you an inch, you want a mile, right? So the king said, sure. And the king did everything I asked, Nehemiah said. It was really a miracle. The king did that because God was looking after me. That's what Nehemiah said. So what is the application here? Application is we must all also prepare well. We must be diligent. We can make plans. When we do, we must pray to God for wisdom. We must not leave God out of the planning or the planning stage. Okay? We shouldn't make plans on our own and then ask God to bless those plans. God should be part of the process from the beginning to the end. Trust God. All right? A lazy person will say, I will trust God. I don't need to make plans much. I don't need to prepare much. It's up to God's will. hey, Sarah, Sarah, whatever will be, you know, that will be the lazy man's approach, okay? But on the other side, the prideful person will say, I'll do it my way, you know, I will make and execute my plans on my own. I don't need God, right? So we don't want to be too prideful or too lazy, right? And finally, we should give the glory to God for the results and not to take the credit for ourselves. Okay, verse 9 and 10. Then I went to the government officers of the district beyond the Euphrates River. I gave them the king's letter. The king sent captains of the army and horsemen with me. But Sanballat from Horon and Tobiah, an officer from Ammon, heard about what I was doing. They were very unhappy because I was coming to help the people in Israel. So we see here, Nehemiah had letters from the king. This shows that the king had changed his mind or decision about Jerusalem, and he allowed the walls to be rebuilt again, right? And the people also see that soldiers that the king sent to protect Nehemiah. Then they would know that the king was helping Nehemiah. The king was backing Nehemiah, right, and giving him protection. But some people who live near Judah heard about all this. They were angry because they were the Jews' enemies, and they did not want anyone to help the people in Israel. That's why we see the introduction of these two characters, Sanballat and Tobiah, right? We will hear about them a bit later. So when you do God's work, there will be bound to be opposition. And this is indeed spiritual warfare. Okay? Okay, reading from verse 11 to 12, 16. Then I came to Jerusalem. After 3 days, I got up during the night and I went out. Only a few men went with me. God had given me the desire to do something for Jerusalem. I told nobody about this. I took no horses except the horse that I rode on. And I went out at night through the valley gate to the snake fountain and to the rubbish gate. I examined the walls of Jerusalem. They were heaps, just heaps of stones. And I saw the fire had burned the gates. I went to the fountain gate and to the king's pool. But I could not continue further because the heaps of stones. The horse that I was riding could not pass through. So I went up during the night by the stream. I examined the wall. I turned back. I went through the valley gate. So I returned. The leaders did not know where I had gone. They did not know what I was doing. I did not tell the Jews or the priests or the chief men, nor did I tell the officials and the other people who would be doing the work. Nor did I tell the officers or the other people who will be doing the work. So we see here that Nehemiah spends the first 3 days planning and surveying. He wanted to know exactly what the project in front of him would require. He doesn't want to make rash decisions. See, a leader should understand all the potential difficulties and obstacles in front of him, right? That's being well prepared. So the application here is, don't be hasty. Don't make rash decisions. Don't act without thinking and researching. Before making important decisions, spend the necessary time required to gather all the relevant information needed. And that's exactly what Nehemiah did. Okay? And verse 17 to 18, reading from verse 17 to 20 to the last verse. Then I said to the Jews, you know that we have much difficulty. Jerusalem is a ruin and fire has burned its gates. Let us build the wall of Jerusalem. Then we will not still be ashamed. Then I told them how God had looked after me. Also, I told them Also, I told them what the king has said to me. And they replied, let us start to build. So they prepared themselves to do this good work. But Sanballat, Tobiah, and Gesem heard about our plan. Sanballat was from Horon, Tobiah was an officer from Ammon, Gesem was an Arab. They laughed at us and they insulted us. They said, you should not be doing such a thing. You are plotting against the king. Then I replied, the God of heaven will give us success. We are his servant and we will begin to build. But you are not citizens of Jerusalem. You have no legal authority here. You have no right to any part of Jerusalem. Okay, so I just want to quickly just round it up here. And so you see here, Nehemiah proposes rebuilding the wall to all Jews. And the main point of his conversation to the Jews was threefold. Firstly, the what? He wanted to propose rebuilding the wall together. Secondly, the why. Why? Because Jerusalem was in a bad situation. And thirdly, the who. Who? God. God will be with them, and this was all the reason they needed just to agree to do it, right? So the application here is, we may not be called to build a wall, but we are all called to build something for God. And what does he want you to build? Are you building your own kingdom or God's kingdom? Building for God takes an effort. It's not easy. So the lesson for us today is, God wants us to arise and build for him. Let's together put our hands to do the good work that God has set before us. And there's one last part here, verse 19 and 20. It talks about the opposition gang, Sanballat, Tobiah, and Gesem. Right? They were scorning at Nehemiah and throwing false accusation. And how did Nehemiah respond? He said, I answered them and said to them, the God of heaven himself will prosper us. Therefore, we his servant will arise and build. And you have no heritage or right or memorial in Jerusalem. So Nehemiah actually ignored their scorn. Nehemiah instead proclaimed his confidence in God, and God's work will succeed. Okay. Okay, I will go to the conclusion part because my time is almost up already. So in conclusion, we see this. God's gracious hand was upon him, right? Nehemiah's courageous request to rebuild Jerusalem's wall was granted by King Artaxerxes. It was an answer to his prayer that he prayed for 4 months. So as Christ's disciples, we rely on the gracious hand of our powerful and sovereign God to open doors for us and help us to courageously obey his word and do his good and perfect will. We have to trust God, and that God will help us to do what is before us. The reflection on the text. What propels you to do the right thing even when it may cost you greatly? Anyone want to just respond to that? What propels us to do the right thing even when it may cost us greatly? Some response from you all. Think about the question. What propels us to do the right thing even when it may cost us greatly?
I think if we believe that the thing is for the greater good, it is bigger than ourselves, and we see lasting value in it. That's one possibility.
Yes. Anybody else?
Parents mentioned knowing that it is right before God.
Yes. What is the right thing that we ought to do? To obey God's word, I suppose, right? And to do that, we must have that something that compels us to do, right? Then we will put every effort and make the sacrifice to do it. So even though God may not call us specifically to rebuild physical fortresses in a struggling nation, what is the mission God has called all of us to do as disciples of Christ? Okay, and how does our mission compare with Nehemiah's mission? Not much difference. Is the heartfelt burden that he received. And likewise, we must also pray to God and ask God to put in our heart what He wants us to do, and be compelled by that burden to commit ourselves to do God's work. All right, just put some thought there. Okay, and so let us learn from Nehemiah here, and let us serve God with the same passion and perseverance. Now, there will be challenges and opposition, but we look to God and we will persevere. We encourage others who serve with us to look to God, just like Nehemiah. He encouraged the whole Jewish community, right? About 50,000 of them, right? He got everyone to be involved, and they all arise and say, we will do the work of God, right? And also, our dependence is not on our own abilities or resources or even good planning. Our hope is in God, in the God of heaven. He alone will grant us success. Amen? So, in closing remarks, Nehemiah performed no signs and wonders. He gave no prophecies. He simply obeyed God and did what he could possibly do as a cupbearer from Susan. He was the right man at the right place at the right time to do the right thing for God. Amen?